bottom line results through our asset performance management. Here is our journey throughout the year. All right, so that's us. If you miss Joy and I myself and Sir Wins will be on the background if you ever have any questions or in need of assistance. So I won't be dragging this any longer. Let me introduce to you our speaker for this afternoon, Mr. Mark David Ke. He is a mechanical engineer with 12 years of engineering and asset management experience in the water and oil and gas, in the oil and gas industry in projects located in, okay, located in Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, PNG, USA, Middle East, Australia, and South America, a certified project management professional and certified asset management practitioner. Okay, so once again, without further ado, please give a round of applause to Mr. Mark David Ke.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Patricia, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Sir Joy and Sir Vince, for having this free webinar as a good knowledge sharing for all of us practitioners here. To introduce, I'm currently affiliated with AMRPP, an upcoming association for maintenance reliability practitioner here in Philippines. And I am one of the founding members here. And one of our goals is asset management. So this initiative is actually brought to you by Erudite, Sir Vince, and me from AMRPP. Sir Vince is also a member of AMRPP. For this upcoming webinar series. This is a series, this is an introduction, this is a start. And we're kicking off with ISO 55K, what it actually is, why is there a term for asset management? Why can't we just use a term maintenance reliability? But that's for future webinars. So thank you. Hopefully my screen is showing okay, and my audio is also going through. If you have any questions, feel free to put it on the chat. And we have a lot of time. I've reserved a lot of time at the end so we can start answering questions if you have them. If you're curious on how to start or how to approach your own asset management system, or you've been tasked, okay, to learn about asset management system, or where you can get certification or certified or websites or reading materials, I'll be fully glad to answer those. So first off, thank you. I was expecting only around 10 or so participants, but we are quite a lot here because I'm looking at it such as a movie. We're only on the introduction of the webinar series. And as we go further along, there would be more participants, audiences involved. So thank you. So let's start.
Sir Mark, if I may, we
Yep.
do have a poll for them to answer.
Yeah. Oh, okay, good. Then I'll be handing it off to you, Patricia. Can
Okay.
you do the poll, and I'll stop my my screen share.
No, that's all right, sir. If
Okay.
everyone can see the poll on their screen, so it's live, and please answer them. It's a 4 question. right? Do you still see the polls, everyone? Okay, here we go. Right, please answer them by clicking on your choices. Okay, so I think there's an error. Sir Mark, should we do this again later on breaks?
No, can you try it again?
Okay, there might be a problem, a technical difficulty with the poll itself.
Yeah, it's currently showing on mine.
Okay,
However, I don't know if I'm able to answer. Oh,
okay,
okay.
so
It's good. It's good.
then I'm seeing our answers. Okay. Mr. Mark, if you're seeing their answers, please feel free to interpret them as you like.
Oh, good. Can you see it on my screen? Because I had the tally. 44% participated, but that's fine. I see that most are interested. Compliance in your future. Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Most are still okay. Most are still early on in their journey, as I'm seeing it, which is fine. There's actually a good entry point because one of my concern is maybe the attendees or the audience or they're already experienced in asset management, but then we go into more industry specific scenarios or how to maintain or do a reliability program on those assets. But as we're starting out, asset management is really cross industries, can be applied to any because we're still explaining a business process or an ISO such that since most ISO such as ISO 9K, 14K, and 18K are applicable to most industries, it's also the same with ISO 55K.
Okay. So with that, I can end the poll now and turn you back over to Sir Mark. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Just sharing the results here. Um, um, I'm assuming most can see my screen. Most are interested in compliance in the near future. Going towards certification, that would be a tough one. Asset management is a journey. As I'm saying, if you're implementing asset management, then there needs to be several pillars involved, such as you need to have a good finance, decision-making management team available, a good technical, that would be the second one. The third one, if your assets or facilities are large or you're from a major organization, then you need to have a good computer or data information system in place. But doing compliance and alignment is completely feasible and good, and you can actually get quick wins and benefits at that time. It's good that everyone is just starting out. It's a journey. We'll go it towards that, explaining what is an asset, what is asset management, and we'll start from there. And I believe as further along as we go to this webinar series, it will go to much more industry specific concerns. For example, if you're on railway, if you're on energies, be it geothermal or windmill renewable, or if you're in water utility, so that it's going to be a trend there because there are specific requirements depending on industry or where you're from, such as regulatory concerns. Expectations. Okay, curious, and that's my kind of guide right there. As you can see, later on, when we will look at my profile, I started as someone curious as well. Familiarizing ISO 55 requirements, we'll delve into starting or knowing what are the ISO 55 requirements. Competencies, I'll show you sites and websites which are good references to start at, or if you want, you can get your certifications as well. Future topics. Oh, certification is nice. Asset lifecycle maintenance reliability. That's good to know. Here in the Philippines, we are AMRPP, Association for Maintenance Reliability Practitioner. We are cross engineering, but there are several organizations as well that handle specifically maintenance and reliability. So you will be at home here in the Philippines. You just need to know where to look at or who to contact with on maintenance and reliability. And I guess that would be good. Oh, a sad thing is that no one actually voted for maturity and gap assessments, but that's fine because towards implementing a business process, it mostly starts is knowing where you are and where you're actually going to, which means in the start of a compliance, alignment, or certification, it mostly starts with doing a maintain a maturity gap assessments. And this should be in line with ISO 55K if you're going forward toward with alignment or certification. Or if you're much more technical oriented, then mostly you want to refer to IPOEA, or what I refer to is in AM Council. So hopefully that piques everyone's interest, and we can start off the free webinar. So we have several training objectives here, and this is really a journey, a long journey. Asset management is a journey, and like any journey, we'll start with knowing what's out there, familiarizing ourselves, applying that knowledge. Then afterwards, we apply. We become experienced. Then afterwards, we optimize. So typical business process. So our training objectives is to understand what is an asset. We use the term asset a lot. What does it actually mean? And why do we actually use the term asset? Because if you ask for our seniors way back 10, 15, 20 years ago, they would say what asset? We do maintenance and liability. And that would be all finances. We will explore ISO 55000 series of standards. And if you're familiar with the ISO format, that typically starts with an ISO 55000, the 55001, and the 55002. So 0, 1, and 2, those would be the formats for ISO. If you're familiar with ISO 9001, 9001, 14001, and 18001, then it would be similar with ISO 55000 as well. Likewise, there are other ISOs as well that are in confluence or in that can supplement your asset management ISO 55K. There's also ISO 25K, which is systems engineering information or database or information systems. We also get to answer what is asset management based on ISO 55001. And there are several interpretation of asset management because there's financial asset management, there's physical asset management, and there's all these terms. And we want to make sure that we know which type of asset management we're doing. To understand the structure of implementing an asset management system based on ISO 55001, and this is just so that if we want to go towards certification or go towards ISO certification for our market branding, or even if maybe in future it will be push as regulatory requirements, then we can pattern our asset management business processes based on ISO 55. Likewise, alignment and compliance is fully well good in terms of asset management, because as if asset management started overseas and it was forced as regulatory compliance. Here in the Philippines, it's gaining steam, it's gaining momentum. Most large organizations doing water utility, energy productions are chasing ISO 55 as well. But currently, we don't have any regulatory requirements or compliance so far. That is so far currently in Philippines. Now, what's not included here is the limitation or the limitation of our webinar. We're currently on a journey, and this is an introduction, which means we will discuss it general wide. This won't be any industry specific, such as how do you implement a maintenance or reliability program, or how do you make sure that your risk profile for each asset that you do is more than sufficient for your initiative. And so we're mostly concentrating on the general book of knowledge of asset management, as well as delving into a beginning look of ISO 55. Because once you get into depth with ISO standard, then it becomes industry specific. Because at that point, ISO just tells you you need to have a document such as this. For example, if you're doing maintenance of an asset, you need to have a document similar to maintaining an asset. It doesn't specifically tell you how to do it. It just tells you that you need to have a plan to do it. So this is more general specific why. Now, if you have any further questions that are industry specific, I'll be glad to answer them if they're within my repertoire, they're within my experience at the end of the webinar. If not, then we will most likely answer them as we go further along the webinar series. So thank you. So before we officially start with the main bulk of the seminar, I'd like to explain who I am just to make sure that I'm just nobody on the internet speaking a hubbub like. So I'm the speaker here. I'm an engineer. I'm Mark David. I am certified CAMA, CPAM, PMP, CMRP, mechanical engineering, and a black belt as well. We'll get into that on the next slide. I'm fairly young as a practitioner. I've been working for 12 years of engineering work experience in plant engineering design, materials, piping layouts, oil and gas, LNG, as well as water utility, asset life cycle, renewal and replacement plants, and management. And I work in various industries. So I work with mainland water services as water utility as a manager. I work with Chiyoda Corporation as a lead engineering person. I work as a materials engineer, piping engineer, designer. I work in GHG Services, a major consultancy global firm, and I work there as a senior advisor in asset management, in which we check the current market trends in the Philippines, where we're heading, and and the overall trend globally. I also work as a senior project manager in Prioritize Success, a US-based company. I have worked as an instructor in Mapua University and FEU, and have spoken in LaSalle and San Beda as well. So I'm very well known locally. And I'm also an active member of global and local industry management and technical organizations such as American Society of Mechanical Engineer, Society of Maintenance Reliability Practitioner, Asset Management Council Australia. I'm on the New Zealand chapter. Philippine Society of Mechanical Engineer, and for some of them, PSIM. Um, so I'm with Balara chapter country heading the professional mechanical engineering. I'm also a member of the Project Management Institute, and I am certified PMP. I'm I'm an associate welder from Philippine Welding Society. I have been a member of NACE before. They have changed their name, Society of Petroleum Institute, Petroleum Engineering, DIEM, Institute of Asset Management, where when I was with Manila Water Service, I was a corporate member, and currently an AMRPP member, which is the Association for Maintenance Reliability Practitioners here in the Philippines. And we're glad to offer you this seminar, this talk, so that a good knowledge sharing for everyone. So my certificates include a certified practitioner in asset management. This is certified by CPA. This is CPAM certification by AM Council. I'm a certified maintenance and reliability professional, CMRP, by Society of Maintenance Reliability Practitioner. I'm a certified asset management assessor, certified CAMA by the World Partners in Internet in Asset Management. This is specifically for ISO 55. I'm a licensed mechanical engineer by Philippine Regulation Commission. I'm a certified project management professional, PMI PMP. I'm a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt by AIGP, a third party certifier. I do have a certificate in internal auditing, ISO 19011:2018, a business continuity management, as well as some risk certificate, but I didn't put it here. I am knowledgeable in data governance, science, and analytics. I've worked as 5 years as an SAP data governance manager. So ERP, they're up my alley. I am experienced in data analysis via Minitab, which is, I think, a well-known platform. And I was a certified Google Analytics previous year, so I haven't renewed that. So you can look at me in my profile on LinkedIn. I'm easily reachable there. So just put my name in, Mark David Ken, you'll find me there. So yeah. So without further ado, I apologize for that lengthy introduction. Let's start. So the first question is, we're going to start with asset and asset management. What is asset? What is asset management? And asset management standard ISO 55000 defines asset as an item or thing or entity that has potential or actual value to an organization. Now, this is a generally broad classification because by in itself, what do you mean by asset? We have physical asset, we have financial asset, we have human asset, we have information asset, and we have intangible assets as well. And if you're non-business oriented, most of these would most likely mean you'll just lump them up as business process. And there are several definitions of asset. Now, for ISO 55 specifically, we will concentrate on physical assets, and that's typically put into the standard. So what's physical assets? Physical assets are items such as plant, machinery, buildings, roads, vehicles, railways, aircraft, pipes, wires, communications, equipment, and other infrastructure. This includes your water utility, your energy production, your energy transmission, your telcos, your buildings, your houses, and pretty much everything else. And this typically forms that, okay, if you're doing asset management, then you need to go to the either top-down approach, in which, okay, you put it as my asset is a facility. Then you have the question, okay, how deep do I go? Or you go to the bottom up approach, in which case you ask, okay, do I start with the smallest faucet, such as one that you can easily buy on a hardware store that's worth like 300, 400 pesos? Or you start with the minimum value, such as if you're operating on pumps and motors. This also signifies that asset management is not industry specific. So it can be applied on a plethora, even if you're working on water utility, even if you're working on oil and gas, even if you're working on on energy, on geothermal, renewable. Everything applies under asset management. Now, it gets industry specific once you start formulating a specific document or initiative or business initiative in doing your asset management system. But for now, we're going non-industry specific, general wide. So who needs asset management? Well, organization in which physical asset management is particular importance include all those involving plant, machinery, buildings, roads, bridges, utilities, electricity, gas, water, transport, oil and gas construction, mining, and minerals processing. That's probably most likely one. Chemicals, manufacturing, distribution, aviation, and defense. And in here, asset management really asks you just one question. In a business, you have an asset and you want to maintain that asset, which means you want it to be working. For example, you yourself, you probably either have a house or a car. And if you buy a house, you want to make sure that after 20, 50 years, that house is well put together. So good maintenance, you stand aside, you make sure everything is working well. And likewise, if you have a car, then you want to make sure that that car gets frequent maintenance. You go to the casa or to the local mechanic. You want to make sure that it's working well and fine. Now, how you go about doing that maintenance, how you go about doing that reliability is up to you, and that will be an industry specific process. But likewise, in acquisition, in getting that car, in getting that house, the acquisition in itself takes time, takes decision, takes business acumen in itself. Would I get car A or car B? Would I get a much more expensive car, or would I get a much more cheaper car? Or would I get a much more expensive car now, but cheaper car to maintain in the long run? Which means, I'm sorry, you want to make sure that your asset is good or fit for your value. Now, there's also a case that in which you acquire that asset, that facility, that car, that pump or motor, that energy transmission, and during the span of your business drive, 10, 15 years, you want to optimize it, you want to improve it, you want to expand it, then that would also go to your asset management plan. So in here, that's really what asset management is. You have an asset and you want to make sure that you're getting much more out of that asset. Now, keeping it the same condition is good, getting more out of it in the future is just added value or bonus. So asset management role. So typically in doing asset management, you typically have a plethora of industry specific that you want to refer to. Let me take a look at here. And an example would be if you're part of, let's say, a utility service or a large organization, you want to be asking, okay, how much does this asset cost to acquire? How much does this asset cost to maintain and operate? And here comes your life cycle asset management. How long does the asset last? How is my budget for the fiscal year? How much do I need to allocate next year? How about your spare parts? There needs to be logistics. So that needs to be taken care of as well. And there comes your capex, your opex, your capital expenditure, your operating expenditure, your acquisition expenditure or your capital expenditure, including your spare parts expenditure, which is part of your operating. Also, there's your risks, your business risks, your business continuity. So how do you make it such that the asset maintains its value and keep on producing? And here becomes the comes into a light the importance of an asset management role. If there's a person that can do everything from finance, procurement, to engineering, technical, to major decision, to information chief officer, then you're a superstar. But most companies delegate it into several roles. And here there's finance, there's procurements, there's information, um, there's maintenance, and sometimes maintenance and operation personnel are separate. So what happens is there's needs to be a chief asset management person that's standing there. And likewise, you need to make or develop a committee in order to have this specific technical expertise. And as you can see from my certification, my certifications are varied. And that's because I started on your shoes as well in asset management. And I became curious. Curious in that, okay, I'm an engineering role. Okay, what does information require? Then next on, what does finance require? Then do I even need to put in change management or ISO 914 or continuity risk? So what happens is if you're planning to go and develop your own asset management system on your company, I highly recommend that you start off in getting an asset management committee in which you can get all of these expertise on one table, on one room, and ask them the question, okay, we have an asset. How do we maintain it? How do we make sure that this asset lasts for 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years? And this can be something simple. For example, if you have a small asset, but sometimes, for example, one of my experiences that if you're on regulatory or you're serving the public here in the Philippines, sometimes you're in an environment in which you can only negotiate tariff rates like once every 10 years or once every 15 years. In that case, asset management becomes really important because you need to have that information and backing in order to negotiate your rates. So the following definition of asset management is given ISO 55000, and that is a coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from its assets. So this includes business processes, multidisciplinary from information, procurement, finance, top management, engineering, logistics, operation and maintenance. Sometimes you have multifunctional teams, be it agile or waterfall. Then you have acquisitions. For example, if your company is actually one of the major stock tickers here in the Philippines, then most likely it's high time for you to expand your operation and do acquisitions of other smaller companies. And those need to do a red flag or due diligence study. And these need to be interrelated and coordinated with one another. And and this gives the importance of having a good technical committee or a good asset management committee so that, okay, does this align with the business overall business mission and vision? Does this align with the overall business goal? And to give you an example is that way back on pre-COVID-19 days, right? If you're handling maintenance and reliability, typically when you do spare parts inventory and management, it would be okay to have a just-in-time scenario in which the spare parts comes from abroad 6 months, 9 months, and once it arrives in the factory and the warehouse, you tend to just use it or as it comes along. But that was on pre-COVID-19 days, and that was perfectly fine as a business overall objective and alignment. However, with current scenarios in which the logistics and shippings are how do I say it, not to be trusted or very hectic or very volatile, that you may not be even be ascertained or that the parts that you order will come in, then the just-in-time scenario sometimes, depending on where you are in the business or what type of industry you are, is actually already problematic. And the just-in-time scenario is not applicable to you, and you most likely just prefer, okay, just order like a 1 year backlog of parts such that if anything breaks down, we have it ready. So in here, there's one of the scenarios in which these decisions need to be discussed. They are interrelated disciplines, and they need to be decided such that on the big business holistic point of view, that you have the proper decision to partake. Will you do a just-in-time approach for your spare parts, or would you want to do a 1 year or 6 months backlog of spare parts just to make sure that everything is going well? So, so given a business or organizational objective, asset management is a set of activities associated with identifying what assets are needed, identifying funding requirements, acquiring assets, providing logistics and maintenance support for asset, and disposing and renewing of assets. And these can be really detailed depending on which industry you go for. But on the top view, you just need to ask the question, okay, I have my assets. What do I need to make them keep going for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? If they're a major asset, about 20, 50 years or so. And from there, you can get into the nitty gritty detail, the nuts and bolts. Okay, we have a 15-year plan. What do we need to do in order to ensure that that 15-year plan happens? What organizations, I mean, what disciplines do we need to tap within the organizations to make that happen? And then you go into the specific risk matrix, the spare parts, the specific project and functional teams, the several brainstorming session. And then you put that up into one document, and that's your asset management plan. So really, asset management is a balancing act. There's financial, there's environmental, sorry, there's social, there's risk, there's service quality, and there's asset performance. And there's a business continuity by asset value realization. And that's a balancing act of costs, risks, performance. Yeah, and let's move on. And this is typically how you do it. So you have an asset, you have an asset life cycle, and your asset life cycle typically goes for how long? Depending on what asset you have, it can go for as little as 3 or 5 years if an electronic component or a server or a system, to around 10, 15 years if it's a good concrete or a good energy transmission. If you're on a large size asset, then that can go for 50 years. If you're on currently on bridges, if you're an energy transformation or transmission, the large facilities. And some transformers can even last 8 years depending if they're maintained properly. Now, if there are a multi-generational assets such as main piping lines that go for 100 years, then you need to plan your asset life cycle there. And remember, in asset life cycle, there's the acquisition, there's the capital expenditures, there's the operating and maintenance expenditures, and afterwards there's the brownfield, there's the touch up if you're going to refurbish it, and finally at the end there would be the salvaging. Now, this would be a major tackle, a major brainstorm session if you're the only one that is doing this. But likewise, it's a good thing you're not. Remember, you're in a committee, and that committee is under an organization. And if you're part of a utility, you probably have a concessionaire agreement or a service level agreement. That means, okay, the asset runs for 100 years. We're here to take care for the asset for 50 years. And we've been ordered to make sure that it's been working for 40 years. 40 years is our span. So if the asset gets handed over to you, then you started off, okay, what is the current state of my asset? And here you go into asset condition. Is my asset performing well? Is it brand new? Is it dilapidated? Does it need refixing? If it is, how do I make sure that it lasts 40 years? If it's impossible to last for 40 years, then what do I need to do in order to replace? If I cannot replace it outright, because I need to make sure that my service level requirements are met, because sometimes you cannot just shut the faucet off. Sometimes you need to plan it so that you have a redundant facility that can take care of your service requirements while your first facility is taking. Then afterwards, then you shift to the second facility. So those are major business decisions that your company, your organizations need to take note of. So a typical asset life cycle consists of a business need or an opportunity. If you're expanding or if you're part of a large organization, then this would be an acquisition, a red flag assessment, a technical due diligence for you, a pre-acquisition analysis. You do an acquisition and commissioning, making sure you have an inspector, making sure the facility is there, making sure the assets within that facility are working. And this is part pseudo asset condition. So sometimes what I'm seeing is that if you're part of a major organization, let's say I put here water utility for one, and you're going to expand your water utility service and you're building another facility, let's say a water treatment plant or a wastewater treatment plant, or maybe you're putting in a pilot project in which you have a new facility. So what you want to make sure is that since they're currently doing the information at the start, which is the 3D model, the CAD model, then you want to make sure you pass that information off to your operation and maintenance. So this may be where the terms that you've encountered, such as building information modeling comes in, or your Revit system comes in, or your 5D information, 4D or 5D information level in which you have up to the nuts and bolts model. Or if you've heard of service class, piping service class, you have up to the, okay, that piping is carbon steel, stainless steel. They use this type of bolt there, connection there, and they use this type of gasket there. Or sometimes you just want to make sure that once you get that facility or asset handover, you get the yearly maintenance plan for the manufacturer or the vendor. Because sometimes when you're doing brownfield operation or you're doing acquisition, sometimes don't get those are on the gray zone and those weren't clear cut, and your maintenance operations are left with, okay, where's the 52 maintenance plan on this? So which means your maintenance and operation will need to start from scratch, which isn't good because it should already be provided there on the initial design phase and the initial construction. And since they've already done testing and commissioning, they should already have the information there. So those would be something to consider there. Now, during operation and maintenance, you need to make sure that the warranty information is there or the procurement information are there, because sometimes warranty start date, they start during the construction of the plant and not during commissioning or startup phase of the plant. So you need to consider that as well. Then finally, you get to the brownfields. Maybe the plant has run for 30 or 40 years. You want to expand that. You get to end of life disposal. You do salvaging. And likewise, how do you go about that? So asset managers, which is you, are involved in all aspect of the asset life cycle for the following reasons: to assist in the organizations to identify and acquire assets needed to support its business aims, be it acquisition of assets, to usage, operation and maintenance asset, to making sure that you're meeting service level requirements. Those are part of it as well. If you're doing business continuity, if you're doing business risks, if you're doing part of ISO 9000, 14,000, quality, safety, if you're doing environment, if you're doing the manpower service of your company, if you're doing the risk matrix, if you're planning the spare parts list and so on, then you're actually contributing to the main asset management as a whole, which means you're making sure that your facility and your asset is working well and good. So from here, you can ascertain maintenance reliability in itself is actually part of the greater asset management. And the greater asset management, this includes the finance, the business, the logistics, the procurement, and everything else that ensures that you have asset continuity, risk management, and business continuity. So going on, asset managers are also involved to provide knowledgeable input into the process of budgeting for capital and operating costs over the whole asset lifecycle. And as I've stated, what we're currently discussing now is just a general overview of asset management, because what we're discussing can be applied into aviation, into bridges, into energy transmission, to water utilities, to pipeline, to chemical manufacturing, to steel manufacturing, and so on. But likewise, when you get into the nitty-gritty details in discussing, okay, we're doing facility maintenance for an energy transmission. It's been there for 15, 20 years, or maybe you're doing mining, which is a very specialized knowledge. Then you need to have a subject matter expert. And they provide knowledgeable input into the process of budgeting or acquisition, or how to do what they do best to make sure that your mining rig or your oil rig or your offshore or onshore rig is working fine. Drilling in itself in the Philippines is a specialized field of knowledge. Mining as well is a specialized field of knowledge. If you're working on a water utility for 10, 15 years, that's also a specialized field of knowledge. Now, and next on, asset managers, sorry, are also there to ensure that systems are in place to support the asset over its lifetime and to avoid nasty surprises down the track. And in here, I don't downplay experience. I have several senior practitioners that are 20, 30 years on the field that know way more than me. And their experience are very well welcome in making sure that your business risk is maintained up to a manageable level. So avoid nasty surprises down the track. Experience, very important. So you've done asset management. So currently already know, okay, basis of asset management. Okay, there's several conditions that I need to consider. You can likewise just do a brainstorm session, ask with several subject matter experts on the field on your company, and just do a brainstorm session. And these are questions to answer if you're going to implement your asset management system. So your asset management needs to continuously provide answer to basic questions about any asset, which is any facility, any equipment that you have. Remember, we're taking a look at physical asset here as for ISO 55K. So does your asset work? Is it working well? Is your availability, reliability doing okay? Is your total equipment availability good, well, and par? Which means you to have your metrics involved. Is it safe to operate? Is it safe to go into? Does it support the overall business aim, such as I stated before, if you're doing spare parts, will you do a just in time, or will you do a 6 months to 1 year um, stock of spare parts inventory? Or is it just a waste of warehouse space, or is it just a waste of inventory management? And likewise, if you have several asset pumps, motors that have different brands and capacities, is it fine on the on a business sense, on an overall business stance, to make sure that they're just separate brands, such as I'm doing China brand today and I'm doing German brand tomorrow? Or will it be okay to make sure that everything is first world country brand, so that make sure that, okay, they're expensive to maintain. They're expensive to acquire at the start, but they sure as heck really cheap to maintain. Or will you change all of your equipment into China brand products? They're very cheap to acquire, very expensive to maintain. At that point, I just remove them and replace them. So that should tie in with your overall business goal. So in relation to your business aim, what have you got right? You need to know the equipment type and location. Where is it stored? Where is it located? And here you get into the point that if you guys have started with asset management, there's several sites, there are several introductions. If your organizations are a member of asset management, such as DIAM, AM Council, or SMRP, then you probably start with doing your asset registry, your critical assets, such as what equipments do you need to prioritize with, because there will always be problems in doing business. There will always be a limited number of resources. Then the question is, where do you prioritize your resources into? So in here, you go into, okay, in doing my asset registry, my list of asset or equipment that I need to consider in my asset management plan, I only consider asset or equipment that are 30,000 pesos and above. Anything less than 30,000 pesos and above, I put that into my consumable expenditures. I don't need to plan for it. If it breaks, I'll just replace it. For those 30,000 and above assets, I need to know, okay, where are they located and what's their hierarchy? Which means, are they pumps? Are they motors? Are they distillers? Are they pressure vessels? Do I need specific items, equipments that just I just need to know just to make sure that they're working properly? Do I need specific calibration scenarios? Do I need specific maintenance activities? Do I need to hire a specialized person, technician with a specific certificate in order to handle maintenance of this equipment? And there you go into the nitty-gritty details. So in relation to the business aids, what have you got right? Do you need to know the equipment type, location? Do you also need to know their model numbers, their capacity? Those are just some things to consider. With regards to that, do you need to know support facilities if you have a third-party subcontractor that does maintenance? Because they're the only ones that can do maintenance for that in the Philippines. And likewise, if you're doing acquisition of assets and you're from a major organization, will you consider building an asset that requires highly specialized knowledge, very difficult to maintain, that support facilities are seldom here in the Philippines, which means good, high technology, which may be other reasons such as lower energy requirement or lower space requirement. But likewise, there's also the option of just using old technology that's time tested, that works. But problem is that it requires a hefty capital, or maybe it requires a decent chunk of space to implement. Such as, for example, if you're in Manila and if you're doing the energy power sector or the water sector, there's very limited space here. And those are things to consider to support facilities. Buildings, logistics, and services by type and locations need to be considered as well. For example, as I said, if you're just in time spare parts, or if you want to have a backlog of spare parts because of what happened with logistics, those need to be considered as well. And support personnel by quantity and skills. And here I put this in because I think this one is really important, because what I see happening is that, of course, everyone here knows the term brain drain or off, but sometimes it's not even brain drain. For example, if you're a large organization, you have a good trained personnel that's been trained in asset management, that's been trained with thermography, that's been trained with vibration. And suddenly after a year, he or she changes division. Now it's on the other division or the other north. You're working on the north side. He got transferred from the south side, and currently you're lacking personnel with skills. So that's one to be considered as well. And all of these are questions that in doing brainstorming session with your multidisciplinary counterparts, you would naturally consider. And you put this on the risks, such as you list them down, then you put priority and you put severity. And likewise, you come up with an equation. You just multiply everything and say, okay, our main priority is to just make sure that everyone is, the asset is working. So we just want to make sure that our spare parts inventory is okay. Or maybe you just want to make sure that your asset registry is up onto par. So rather than, like, there are several ways in implementing an asset registry. You either do manual checking Or what you do is you do a much more computerized assisted approach in which it's not more prone to error. So moving on. If not, what should we doing about it, for example? So developing a case for activities such as the following and following it up with appropriate levels of management. Buildings, plant, machinery, equipment, buy, resell, lease, or terminate. And here we get into procurement, to finance, your capital expenditure, your operating expenditure, and as well as your asset support personnel. Do you recruit, reduce, train, outsource, insource? And sometimes outsource may be your only option because maybe you're put into a position in which you want to reduce manpower, or you're forced into a position that your company needs to downsize because regulatory is at your back stating that you have too much manpower. So those are scenarios that needs to be considered on a bigger business point of view. So um, moving on, we get to discuss what are the benefits of a good asset management. And in here, similar to implementing ISO 9, 14, 18, or 25,000, you want to make sure that it's a systematic approach. Remember, asset management is a journey. It doesn't need to be perfect first. And I highly doubt that you're going to make it perfect on the first try. And because in doing that, you need to have subject matter expert that have done and have done it on the same industry as you. For example, you're in water utility, then that would mean your subject matter expert should be on water utility, and that subject matter expert should have on the same environment as you. Same culture, same Philippine setting, same location. But likewise, let's say if you're in the energy industry, you're out of luck because looking at the global trend, although it's catching on to the Philippines, the practitioner that you can get is most likely just water practitioners, or if you're banking on energy practitioners for asset management, those will be foreign personnel, and they have not worked on the Philippine setting as before. So asset management is a journey. If you can get it perfect at start, then you're a superpower, you're a Superman, good for you. But likewise, 9 out of 10, it will be a journey at the start. You just want to make sure that you have the basics at start. You want to have good informational management. Because if you're wrong on information, that means you're wrong on output. If you're wrong on input, then that means you're wrong on output. And you need to have a good asset management plan. It doesn't need to have a lengthy 10-year, 15 asset management plan. Just a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan would suffice for now. A quick wins. You also want to make sure that you have a good asset management committee that represents several parts of the organization. This includes operational targets, financial targets, environmental regulations, health and safety regulations, even insurance requirements and risk management. So your legal department needs to be present there as well. And you need to have a systematic framework for training and development of staff for the understanding and managing of asset portfolio. And this is sometimes going to be difficult depending on where you're going to look at, because most practitioner of asset management in the Philippines is engineering oriented. So I myself started as a mechanical engineer. But likewise, as we're peeling back what makes an asset manager, we tend to realize that, okay, you don't actually only require technical knowledge. You need to have good business acumen as well. You need to be able to do business case studies. You need to do project management. You need to be able to do change management. Not saying that all of these can be one person, but you're most likely going to be in a group. And what typically done is you have a person handling maintenance and reliability. There can be one person, they can be two-person, one handling maintenance, one handling reliability. There would be a senior manager handling your information system, your information officer. There would be a senior manager handling your handling your renewal plans or your project plans or your replacement. And of course, you need to have a dedicated change management towards that as well, because it's really difficult to um, ensure that every stakeholder is actually on track and online in doing asset management. So I'm actually sharing here a simple model. This is an asset management model I got from GFMAM. That is a global forum for maintenance and asset management. And I'll share you guys the site references and the reading materials later. Um, And this is a simple model, a business process model, in which this is your asset management system. And asset management system in itself is not a software, okay? It's a business process. And in that business process, you evaluate the opportunities, your risks, your threats, similar to your SWOT model if you're doing business management or introductory business management. You need to evaluate your risks, your opportunities. And from there, you need to have your council or your committee members do a decision making and balancing. Risks, costs, management. And there you need to discuss your value drivers. Okay, if you expand your personnel, will it be worth it? If you increase your capacity or your competency in asset management, would it pay back down the road? And likewise, humans are asset as well. Let's say if you acquire another facility that is in line with you, is it in line with your business service level? Because it's currently getting a tough environment out there. And likewise, you need to balance performance, cost, and risk. And going towards a very tough environment. We're currently going into an environment after COVID-19 where regulatory is breathing down your necks, and we're required to give out the same service level requirements, but with either same cost or lower costs, utilizing the same asset, which are now a decade older. So it's a tougher environment in which you need to give out the same performance. So you need to evaluate performance, cost, and risk, as well as value. And likewise, you also need to evaluate other opportunities that are out there. Of course, if you're doing this, there needs to be a time concept as well. Because as I stated, you need to meet your operational targets, sorry, your financial, your environmental regulations, health, safety, insurance requirements, overall business risks, and you'll have business opportunities and threats that you need to decide where to go to. So this needs to be decided on a much more holistic approach. But likewise, you're only given a definite budget. Now, in doing a business process or business objective, you have your opportunity, but you don't have an unlimited budget. You have just a definitive, let's say 1 million, 2 million to work with your project initiative if you're doing a new project. So you want to concentrate on those low hanging fruits or quick wins, okay? With, with the overall end goal on maintaining your asset and optimizing your asset. So time will need to be considered, i.e., ensuring you get the low-hanging fruits or those that are easily optimized before you tackle on the big problems, such as it be much more beneficial if you do an energy optimization to your facilities? Is your pump or motor's energy efficiency really low? And is your energy expenditure really high that you actually gain benefit in optimizing that first? So you want to concentrate on the low hanging fruits. So like you need to stand before you walk and you need to walk before you run. Having this mindset ensures that you get quick wins needed to get your asset management initiative rolling. Because likewise, asset management is a business initiative approach. You want to get the quick wins in order to have the overall top management vying for your asset, or your stakeholders, which is your top management team, vying for your asset management initiatives. Yeah, and I'll share you guys the link where, um, feel free. I'll share this all to you. Okay. And let me see where I am on the presentation. Okay, we're moving on to ISO 55000. And here we will discuss alignment, compliance, certification. We'll go into ISO 55001, 55000, 55000, 55001, and 55002. And I'd like to add that there are several information available in asset management online. You can refer to AMRPP, or you can refer to organizations such as the one I've shown you before, GFMAM, or WPIAM, which is GFAM is the Global Forum of Maintenance Asset Management. WPIAM is the World Partners in Asset Management, or DIAM.org, or even amcouncil.au. Likewise, I'll share you guys the link later. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to post them on the chat. Likewise, we're going towards ISO 55000 now. So ISO 55000 series of standards, and these are separated into 55,000, 55,001, and 55,002, typical for how ISO is set up. ISO is a structured view and understanding of asset management. It's an effective relationship between top management, asset management operation, maintenance, as well as business top management there. Um, some benefits include asset financial returns. If you do alignment and compliance, you do a much more well-informed asset management decision, because now you have a matrix or a business framework to actually latch onto. Insurance, health and safety, regulatory, and risk management benefits. And that's put there. But likewise, if you're already handling 9,000, 14,000, and 18,000, an unrealized benefit is that you only need to do a small jump in order to get ISO 55K. You're already part way there if you're already doing ISO 9,000, 14,000, and 18,000. Because ISO 9, quality, safety, environment, and working conditions, that all contributes to the greater business initiative, which is asset management. You do good company recognition and marking, and you do improvements in training and development. So an ISO 85 is an international standard covering asset management. Just putting it out here for those that are not well known with international standards or ISO. ISO 55 is previously known as PAS 55, which was published by the British Standards in 2004. The current the current version is 2014. There was an information to revise it up to 2020 version, but it didn't came to pass. The next standard, if you're just curious, if you're implementing it, is up to 2024. So if you're actually planning on implementing ISO 55 certification, go ahead, because the next standard won't be out for the next 2 years. So ISO 55000 is a standard for asset management. It is a standard developed for the use of people or organizations involved in asset management, in this case, physical asset management. These standards are ISO 55000, overview, principles, and terminology, and we're going to take a look at that, a brief snapshot of ISO 55K. 55,001, management system and requirements. We'll take a look into these. 55,001, if you're familiar with ISO, typically you get certified with the 001 standard. The 55,002 asset management system, which includes the guidelines for application for ISO 55001. And here, this describes the basic document requirements on how you get your asset management system rolling. So overview, I typically, since this journey, this is an exploratory, I typically start with looking at the table of organizations, the contents, the index. And in here, there's the foreword, this is the introduction and scope. And this one I will leave to you. It doesn't differ much from ISO 9, 14, and 18. And likewise, if you're going to implement ISO 55K, you're probably going to get a copy of this document as well. I will be skipping the asset management 2.1 general and 2.2 benefits of asset management and 2.3 assets, because we have already discussed it on the previous slides, although it's not specific on ISO 55, but it is applicable as a whole. So once you get the document, you read through 2.1 to 2.3, you'll be easily able to get a handle of things. I will highlight on 2.4 and 2.5 because I think those would be important points. And I will highlight on 3.1 and general terms relating on asset management. Okay, so starting on with 2.4. So 2.4, overview of asset management. So asset management involves the balancing of costs, opportunities, and risks. And it's what we've stated earlier, against the desired performance of asset to achieve organizational objectives. And performance, that comes into your availability, your equipment availability, your equipment reliability, your total equipment effectiveness, if you're going with those metrics, and what are needed with the organizational objectives. For example, you're currently handling a facility, and that facility has a total equipment effectiveness of 80%. This year, we wanted to go to 85 to 85, 87%. Then those would be one of the metrics you want to go against. So the balancing might need to be considered over different time frames. Like I said, asset management is a journey. You want to just be implemented at start. If you're getting boggled with the information, you just need to understand one thing, that asset management is just one question. You have an asset. How do you make sure that this asset keeps working? And if it is working, how do you optimize that asset? And typically, you start with doing a baseline. Your asset is working, your asset is not working. You make sure that it's working on the second year, maybe. Then from there, since it's working 95% of the time, you want to then tweak its service requirements, higher quality, higher availability. Then you get into the more maintenance proactive side. Okay, I don't want to have this maintenance equipment do downtime. So that means, do I need to do a preemptive maintenance or a proactive maintenance? So then you go into that. So asset management enables an organization to examine the need for and performance of asset and asset systems at different levels. Additionally, it enables the application of analytical approaches. And here we get into the metrics, we get into total equipment effectiveness, the availability, and the targets for the year. And also it includes disposal and managing of any potential liability. So insurance as well as legal concern. For fundamentals, asset management is really based on four main pillars here, as stated in 55K. We have value. Asset exists to provide value to organization and stakeholders. And stakeholders are everyone that is relating to that asset, including you. Next, we have alignment. Asset management translates to organizational objectives. Oh, and 2.4, yeah, 24. Yep. To organizational objectives, into technical and financial decision plans and activities. And in here, as I said before, if you're doing spare parts inventory, do you want it to be just in time, or do you want to be a 6-year or 10-year storage of spare parts? And these needs to be aligned on the greater business objectives. Third, you need to have leadership. Leadership and workplace culture. Culture is important because if there's a mistake, you want to be improved. And likewise, is your culture a culture of reliability, a culture of good maintenance? You need to develop that. If it's not at present at first, then it will take some time because people tend to adjust. Now, this comes in the process of having a dedicated change management personnel or someone that can at least help you assist. Because, for example, if you're doing an asset management system, you've implemented the process and you've acquired an SAP system. An SAP is Solutions, Application, and Products. And this SAP system is typically used for plant maintenance or materials. So if you're doing your 52-week maintenance plan on your SAP PM, you want to make sure that your people are using the SAP PM, because if they're not using it, then that would just be a waste of money. And likewise, if they're not using it, then you're not um, um, making sure that the benefits are visualizing or are coming true. So this needs to be a culture in place, so a change management. And the fourth, needs to be assurance. So asset management gives assurance that assets will fulfill their required purpose. So as I've stated, if your asset is working fine, doing well, then you're probably already doing asset management and you're doing a really good bang up job on it. If you're able to optimize it, then that would be just icing on the cake. Section 2.4.3 of ISO 55. In here, we get a simple model of asset management. And in here, we get into a big business process point of view. So we have the big circle, which represents the overall organization. And that's your organization there doing assets, making sure that you're doing service level requirements. The smaller circle is your asset management. And it's a coordinated activity of organization to realize value of asset. This coincide with your interdisciplinary, your logistics, your acquisitions, your operations, your maintenance, your 52-week maintenance plan. It's there. Going on the smaller side, it's your asset management system. It's a set of interrelated or interacting elements to establish asset management policy, asset management objectives and processes, and to achieve those objectives. If you have your targets, your KPIs, your metrics, if you have your competency requirements, your certificate requirements, your thermography level 2 or 3, or your CAT 2 or 3, it's there. And down at the smallest circle is your asset. You have a list of assets, you have your pumps, your motors, your facilities, your cars, your mobile assets, and you want to make sure that they're working well, they're fully categorized. As I said, if you want to make sure that anything above 30,000, don't coin me on this. You can use whatever number you want. 30,000 or above, then you can use that. Section ISO section 2.5.3, elements of an asset management system. And it here just depicts the parts of what are deemed as major parts of the ISO 55. You have the context of the organization. You need to know the organization itself, the leadership, the planning, the support, the operations, performance evaluation, and improvement. And we'll get to that on further down. As for the terms, yeah, sorry, I'm actually increasing the pace because uh, I'm looking at the time. And in here, I put there just some important abbreviations that needs to be considered: life cycle, asset portfolio, asset system, and critical asset. Life cycle is self-explanatory. Asset portfolio is a compilation of assets. An asset system is a set of assets such as pumps, all of your pumps, all in one set. Critical asset, which means asset that are very important to you. For example, if that asset shuts down, either your plant gets a 50% downtime or your plant shutdowns completely. So that's a critical asset that you don't want to be breaking down. And those assets need to be considered and put on the registry. Next, there's an asset management, which is a coordinated activity of organization to realize value from an asset, straightforward. A strategic asset management plan. So you have your maintenance, you have your reliability, you have your specific brainstorm session and plans interrelated. And these are what you arrive in on the brainstorm session. And you put that on one document. So what does the procurement team need to do with asset management? What does your operations team need to do with asset management? And likewise, what's your plan 5 years, 10 years from now? And those are the SAMP and the asset management plan, respectively. Next, you have your management system, which is a set of interrelated elements of the organization, and asset management system. So business processes and business processes specifically for assets. Yep. And I'll give this presentation to you. So next we move on to ISO 55001. In here, I didn't give any highlight. Straightforward, we're just going to start with the table of contents. So there's typically same thing, forward introduction, scope, terms and definition. But as you can see as before, in here you can see the context of the organization, the leadership and the planning, the support, the operations, the performance evaluation and improvement. Now, in here, I won't go through these one by one. The reason being, you need to really read the document as is, because if we go through this one by one, then I'm just showing you the entire document. Now, this document has 72 shell requirements. And shell requirements is the requirements that you need to consider or you need to apply to your organizations in order for you to develop an asset management system or plan. For the organization itself, such as your asset management plan, your discussion, your brainstorm session, your 5-year, 10-year goals, those are 10 shell requirements. For your leadership, that's 5. For your planning, that's 12 shell requirements. For your support, be it if you are going spare parts, third-party consultancy, or third-party outsourcing for your maintenance, that's 16 shell requirements. Your operations, that's 9 shell requirements. Your performance evaluation, that's your optimization. Your current auditing, that's 14. And your improvement, that's 6. That's optimization, renewal. So similar with any ISO, you start with a baseline, then you improve on that, then next year you improve on that, next year you improve on that, and after 3 years, 5 years, then surprise, you have your own asset management fully compliant and fully aligned, and in a few years you'll be fully certified. And typically with any ISO, you work with the plan, do, check, act, which is you implement, which is you plan, you implement, you do the act, you check, you act, you improve, you optimize. Now I put here specific shell requirements, because I know that some would most likely be curious on what shell requirements are those, and this is just a sample of the 72 that are highlighted in 55001. So asset management objectives include the strategic asset management plan shall be aligned to and consistent with the organizational objectives, which means as first, you need to have your strategic asset management plan. What's your vision? What's your goal? What does your organization plan to do 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? Do you want to make sure that your asset is performing the same thing 5 years from now? Or do you want it to be performing um, more than double its capacity 10, 15 years from now, which means from there, you then need to decide, do you need to supplement? Do you need to acquire another asset in order to meet those service level agreements? You also need to consider the overall mission and vision of the organization, and those needs to be aligned with the overall plan of your asset management. The organization shall determine the boundaries and applicability of asset management system to establish its scope. And like I said, this is the time when it gets industry specific, because, for example, if you're implementing this on a telecommunications, then most asset management systems or subject matter experts or rule of thumb or golden thumb does not apply into energy transmission or might be water utility or oil and gas. Organizations shall integrate the planning to achieve asset management objectives with other organizational planning activities. And in here, I highly recommend that you get an asset management committee so that you have a representative of each one of your main business pillars. The next, organization shall determine and provide the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of the asset management system. Includes your operational costs, maintenance costs, capital costs, acquisition costs, even your supporting, which is your learning and other costs associated with it. The organization shall determine its information requirements to support its assets, asset management system, and achievement of its organizational objectives. And I personally work with SAP. But likewise, there are several ones on the market that can cater to your informational requirements, SAP, Maximo, Revit, and so on. And likewise, if your organization is small enough, you may not even need an informational database because you can probably do it in-house. So that's one thing to consider as well. Okay. And next we move on to 55,002. Sorry, this is a typo. And here I highlighted 4.1, understanding organization and its context, and planning 6.2, asset management objectives and planning to achieve them. Support 7.2, competence. Yeah. So 4.1, understanding the organization and its context. And the reason I put it here, because ISO 55002 actually explains, okay, 55,000 is the definition, 55,000 is the certification, 55,002 is what do you actually need. And in here, 4.1.1 states that an asset management system includes, you need to have an asset management policy, a guiding principle. It's maybe a one-liner or a two-liner on your organizational policy. You need to have your asset management objectives, in which if you have a policy, asset management policy, then you most likely have an asset management department or asset management division within the company. From there, that division needs to have their objectives in check. If it's maintenance, that's fine. If it's reliability, that's fine. If they want to do other things such as maintenance reliability and they want to delve further into the actual business implementation, then it needs to be put there. Informational requirements, it needs to be put there as well. The next is the strategic asset management plan. You need to have, alongside with the objectives of the division or department, you need to have a 5-year, 10-year plan. What is the reason your asset management department division is there? And what do you plan to do 5 years, 10 years from now? And likewise, why did the overall organization make an asset management system division department? And what's the organization's goal 5 years, 10 years? So we're almost finished up to the presentation. And I'll skip 6 to 1 objectives and 1 3. I believe these are common terms such as CAPEX, OPEX, level of service, and these should be well familiar with you guys, and these should be industry specific. I would also highlight section 7.2, which is competence, because there would be a requirements on what are the necessary trainings that are required to be an asset management practitioner. And likewise, as you can see from my certification, you can get certified and you can get trained. And that's one of them. And yes, that's it. We're moving on to asset management and business contacts. And these are industry specific, but I just want to highlight one thing, and that is recently we have encountered a 7 to 7.3 magnitude earthquake, and that depending on which news article are you looking for. Now, buildings are assets, bridges are assets, utilities are assets. Now, if that happened to you, do you have a plan? And does that include on your asset management plan? Do you even need to include that in asset management plan? Or does that include on your risk matrix? And those needs to be considered for each everyone. For my experience, because really it's a force of nature, you can't really predict it. They just put it as it's in the plan, but we accept the loss. So similar to that. Well, feel free to read the business context. In here, I just put in an overview of what typically is done if you're actually already implementing it on the business and business process. And likewise, once we get into the webinar series, then that would be great. Then you can just ask industry specific question on how you get start or how do you start with doing the actual asset management on your business. I have suggested sites: BIM, AM Council, WPIM. I put it here, and I also put here AMRP. This is a fellow maintenance reliability practitioner here in Philippines, and this is brought to you by AMRP as well as Erudite. And from here, I am handing it over to Patricia for the question.
Yes, hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are you all doing,
Mm.
everyone? I haven't received any questions on the chat or our live, so I was thinking maybe if
Mark,
you have any
I have a
questions.
question. I
Yes.
have a question.
Yes.
Mark,
Sir
it was
Ahmed.
an excellent, yeah, it was an excellent presentation actually, and it reflected our business in the model really. I'm well connected with real estate. Actually, I'm from Qatar. I work in a real estate asset management
Oh,
sector.
that's nice. I have a
It's,
friend
it's,
working in Qatar.
yeah, it's good, nice to hear. And
Yeah.
I'm working in a public sector. Basically, I'm a consultant secondary to public sector, and we have a couple of it's like a Lusail project. I'm working in a Lusail city project, and we have an exclusive asset management department. And I'd like to know, like, what is your suggestion as a best practice for a real estate domain, real estate asset management? I mean, how we can have a strategic asset management plan? But we don't have a ISO 55000 gets implemented,
Mm.
but we have our own, corporate asset plan, corporate policy procedures. What do we call as policies and procedures document
Oh, okay,
in
okay.
technical, but
Yep.
we don't have a terminology called strategic asset management.
Mm.
So how we can develop that strategic
Mm.
asset management plan for
Yeah.
real estate contacts in Middle East domain,
Yep.
especially in
Um, yeah, seems clear. Just let me rephrase the question. You're currently on track on asset management. You're currently on the beginning stages of asset management, and you're currently working on how you can do that further. You've been informed of ISO 55, but not yet too deep into that. And you're currently wondering if there are any best practice for asset management or how you can go about implementing it on your organization. Is that right?
Yes, you are right.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. In doing asset management, I highly still recommend that you start off with an asset management committee in which you have several people with various knowledge within the organization, within a company, because they probably have an idea. For example, why did they start asset management in the first place? And they need to answer that question first, and then they need to implement a plan that is related to that. And the reason being is, as I've stated, an asset management covers end to end, which is a wide. You can do replacement, you can do new acquisitions, you can just do maintenance operations, and you can do everything under the sun. But likewise, at the end of the day, you have limited budget and you will not be able to do them all. So you need to prioritize. So once the reason that they form the asset management in the first place gets addressed and that's put into the plan, and you have additional leeway, then you can move on to that. From there, once you have the committee set up, then you can do an asset management maturity or gap assessment. And you can find this from DIM or EM Council or any asset management training, because every asset management starts with a maturity gap assessment. And typically it goes like this. You know where you're going and you're currently at the beginning. You need to fill a gap at the middle, and those are the list of activities that you need to do. And all asset management work starts from there. If you're lacking competency, knowledge, then it starts from there as well. Hope that answers your question. Yeah, and
Yeah, it's right. And I also remember that we brought external SME architects for making a policy framework, and but we did not realize as strategic assessment since we don't have implemented standard here. Anyway, it answers my questions actually. Thank you so much,
thank you.
professional. Yeah.
Thank you, Sir Amin. So, if anybody else has a question, you can always raise your hand or open your microphones. Anyone?
Yeah, I guess we can continue. If you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat. Uh, do forgive us for extending a little.
Yes. And I think, Sir Mark, you're gonna sum up the discussion for us.
Oh, yeah. So just a few more minutes of your time. Don't worry, it won't take long. And here, I just reiterate, feel free to go to DIM, AM Council, WPIM, and these are excellent resource materials. I'd like to introduce Asset Management Landscape. This is from GFMAM, so you can have it online. And in here, it just discussed the several knowledge areas for asset management. You can go through in this one by one. The websites, some of them give it for free, and some you just need to pay a paltry membership fee, and everything's free. So there are several categories of asset management: life cycle, decision making, strategy planning, asset information, organization, risk and review. So if you want to go in depth into asset management, then you can go from here. And likewise, further suggested reading materials. I do recommend that you get a copy of 55001 and 55002 if you're planning to do alignment and certification. If not, then you just can go with the free version from GFMAM, which they have a GFMAM Landscape Second Edition, Value of Asset Management or Organization, and ISO 55000 Auditor Assessor Specification if you want to do internal auditing of asset management on your organization. I also recommend the book Physical Asset Management, second edition by Nicholas Anthony. This would be a good read for introductory asset management practitioner. And likewise, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. And if you have any question, just feel free to ask. We'll send the presentation as well as the contacts, and I'll hand it over to Patricia.
Yes, and we will always be here. You can always email us your questions if you want to relay something to Sir Mark. Please feel free to email us. We also have a training course for COM as well as its certification. So with that said, Thank you everyone for coming. I do have a last poll I wish to share with you, so I'm relaunching them. It's an evaluation. Please answer them in a minute. Okay. You should be seeing a poll of 7 questions. Can you see the poll? Anyone? Okay.
I just did it.
Okay. Closing the poll in 30 seconds. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up if you're done answering the poll? Thank you very much. All right. So everyone, thank you, and big thanks also to Sir Mark for for this great webinar. I'd like to call on our president to present this certificate, a token of our gratitude to our speaker. Please all welcome Sir Wins Bernal. Sir Wins.
Thank you very much, Patty. And I would like to say thank you to Mark. Mark, maraming salamat in Filipino, and to our foreign guests and our participants on this webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time. Maraming salamat, Mark, for giving us your time and your expertise in sharing your knowledge about ISO 55000 Asset Management System. Thus, as the president of Erudite Reliability Services, I would like to present to you this certificate of appreciation presented to Engineer Mark David K for sharing his valuable knowledge as a guest speaker at the webinar entitled ISO 55000 Asset Management Systems Awareness, given this 28th day of July 2022 at Erudite Reliability Services OPC Zoom channel. Signed by myself, Erwin D. Bernal, and Mark. Maraming salamat once again. I appreciate all the feedback on the all questions and also the questions that have been shared. As mentioned, we will be sharing with you the material, so we make sure that you have your email address on the registration link. So for now, we expect that we will see you once again on our upcoming webinar series on asset management as we collaboratively will make it a better planet, safer, and more profitable for your respective organizations. So maraming salamat. Thank you very much and have a good day. A big
Thank
round of
you.
applause to Mark, to Engineer Mark.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for
Thank you,
having me here.
everyone, Mark.
Thank
Salamat.
you, Mark.
Bye for
Thank you
now.
po. Thank you everyone.
Thank
Also,
you.
Thank
Thank you.
you
if you've
also
missed the
to
first
Erudite.
part,
Thank you,
if you
Mark.
missed the first part of our webinar, you can always check our YouTube channel. All our webinars are posted there. Thank you, everyone.